Hello, I'm here to teach you about the game that I created because nobody is more obsessed with the game that I created than I am. So we'll get into the specifics in a moment, but basically the concept of the game is it's a cooperative disaster management with a time loop mechanic. Players are using the time machine on their spaceship to create a time loop so that they can repeat the game. They just push their luck to learn as much as they can about the future of the game, time loop back to the beginning, and use that added knowledge to try and solve the puzzle before it happens. If you like your cooperative disaster management games in the style of, say, Pandemic or Flashpoint, then hopefully this will be a really neat implementation of those rules with this little quirk added on top that I think makes for a really interesting puzzle for the players. So hello and welcome to Trouble on the Tempus, where the players take on the roles of the crew of the Tempus ship, a intergalactic space time travelling vessel as it slowly explodes around them, and they must try to fix the ship, get the engines working, and then pilot their way home. So let's look at the ship. I was going to throw this, but it's precious. We don't have very many of them. This, as you can see, is the board. It is our Tempus ship, almost like a schematic design with a series of locations about the main body, and then the bridge split into 6 locations up here. We also have spaces for our cards and our space for our shields controls. So let's start with our setup. Every location on the board that has a name, airlock, engineering, sickbay, hyperdrive, and so forth, also has a space attached to that name for a randomized number token. These are numbered 1 through 9 and can be placed in any order. It doesn't matter, they just need to be randomized at the beginning of the game. We also need to seed the board with item cards. 1 body armor in the security room, an electro tool in the shield generator, exoskeleton in maintenance, 2 fire extinguishers in the central corridor, a med kit in sickbay, a spacesuit in the airlock, and a toolkit in engineering. We'll also place the shield token on the shields track at the top point so the shields are still fully working, and we'll place these 2 completion tokens nearby the board. And they're going to create my disaster deck and paradox deck. The disaster deck is going to go here and it's going to determine the random order of disasters that are going to be placed on the board. This deck is going to be made up of growing disasters and major disasters. Growing disasters have multiple effects on them, which vary by player count, and major disasters only have a single effect, but it can be quite a big effect. The simplest difficulty, I'm just going to create 3 decks of 4 cards, one of each card in the 4 stacks being a major disaster. This setup is not dissimilar to how Pandemic stacks its deck. And we're just going to shuffle each of the 3 decks and create one big deck out of it. That way we know that in every 4 cards of that deck there is a major disaster. We don't know where in that stack of 4, it could be first, it could be last, it could be anywhere. After that we're going to build our paradox deck, which is going to determine how often we can time travel. First of all, we're going to put the Lost in the Void card at the bottom. The Lost in the Void card causes an immediate game loss. And then we're going to shuffle the other 11 paradox cards and put 2 of them on top of it to create a deck of 3. And then going to draw character cards for our players. In this case, I'm going to set up for a 3-player game, so 3 characters. Captain Jenkins I've got here, Engineer Ramirez, and Technician Patience. And then I'm going to find their character standees and place them on the time drive, which is the starting place for all of the players. The rest of the tokens can be laid out in easy accessible piles. Damage, fire, electrical faults, wounds, and locked doors, one of which we're going to place over the exterior airlock door to signify that the airlock is currently closed, which is good because airlock being open would be bad. I'll explain it later. Lastly, I'm going to draw a card from the hyperdrive deck. This will determine our game win condition. It's going to go in this spot here in the back of the hyperdrive and has a number of effects. First of all, it tells you how many tokens to place in the hyperdrive. In this case, it says 4 damage. The card we've drawn is called fire. So it's probably going to just place some fire. It's then going to have an additional effect which says place 1 fire in the hyperdrive, maintenance, and fuel cells. So the back of the ship is basically on fire. Again, there are 5 of these cards and they each have a different starting setup for the game. To win the game, players must clear off all of the disaster tokens from the hyperdrive. First time the hyperdrive has no disaster tokens in it, we flip the card over. Once that card is flipped over, a player at the security controls can send a distress call as an action to place this token here. Player at the shield controls can reinforce the shields as an action placing this token there. Once those 2 tokens are on the board, another player at the flight controls can pilot the ship home and win the game. But they have to fix this card first. They have to get that card flipped down, place these 2 tokens, and then pilot home. Every round we're going to draw a disaster card which will add more disasters to the board, usually in the form of these tokens, and the players don't know what they're going to be, but for the start of the game all they know is they have to put out these fires and fix these damage. On a player's turn they take 2 moves and 1 action in either order. Either they can move first and then do the action, or do the action and then move. A movement consists of either crossing a dotted line or moving through an open doorway. So in this instance a movement is 1, then 2. An action could be to pick up an item card in your current space, use an item card for its action. For example, the fire extinguisher here puts out fires, the electro tool fixes electrical faults, the toolkit fixes damage, as does the exoskeleton, and the medkit removes wounds. There's also a number of wearables. The body armor, for example, gives you 2 extra wound slots, and the spacesuit prevents you from being killed if the airlock opens or the life support goes down. The exoskeleton is a worn item that grants the players the action to fix some damage. It also gives them the ability to not be knocked down and to move through damaged areas, because it costs 1 additional movement to enter a space that contains any amount of damage. It doesn't matter how much damage it is, it just costs 1 extra movement to enter there. Meaning that if there was damage in this space, it would then cost this character here 1 and 2, both their movements, to enter that space. Leaving the space has no additional effect, it's just entering it that is slowed down by the fact that it's collapsed through it. Fire in spaces has no effect on movement, you can move happily through it, but fires place damage, so if you end your turn in a space that's on fire, a damage will be placed, and anytime any token is placed in your space, you will take a wound. So if you finish your turn in a space that's on fire, the damage will be placed, you'll take a wound for the damage. Similarly, if you were a character in a space and a fire or even an electrical fault was placed there, you would take 1 wound for that token being placed. If they were both placed, you would take 2 wounds, 1 for each token being placed. And if your wounds are ever full, as they currently are on the Tension Patience, your character is unfortunately killed. And all players have to be alive to win the game. But don't worry, there is a way to come back. Other actions available are you may initiate a trade, which means you can trade the items as much as you like between the players in your space. You can do as much trade as you want as 1 trade action. You can also, if needed, you could lock a door that was attached to your current space, or indeed if it was already locked you could unlock the door. The reason you might do that is because locked doors prevent fires spreading, as well as a few other effects. Every character has its own unique power, so some characters may have actions that they can take as part of their unique abilities. And lastly, you can use an action to activate any of the blue locations on the board. Blue locations mean that that location has a specific action that can be taken when you are in it. For example, at the security controls, you can place or remove all locked doors connected to 1 space. So if you needed to lock something, if you were in the security room, you could then lock engineering as an action by placing those 3 doors there. Similarly, if you were at security controls, you could unlock engineering by removing the doors. The security room is similar in that it's to place or remove up to 3 locked doors anywhere on the board. It's not limited by the space. It's a more flexible version of the security controls. The only door that can't be affected by those actions is the airlock exterior door. You cannot open the airlock exterior door by remote control unless stated otherwise. However, the airlock does have its own action here, which is to open the exterior airlock door. So if you do need to open that door, you have to do it from inside the airlock. Why might you do that, you wonder? Well, if you open the exterior airlock door, it removes all of the fire that's on the board. But it also moves every player on the board 5 spaces closer to the airlock via the shortest route. And if you would move beyond the airlock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you are sucked out into space and killed. In this instance, every single player would be killed. And I guess you didn't realise if everyone's killed, that's game over. You can avoid this, as I said, by wearing the spacesuit, or if you strategically lock doors to avoid being sucked all the way out, then yeah, maybe you could make that work for you, especially if the board's on fire and you're in a kind of desperate situation. Locked doors block adjacency for all game purposes, meaning that you can't move through them, fires can't spread through them, and you can't be forcibly dragged through them in the instance of an airlock opening. There's a few other effects they may have, but that's primarily their usage. They will block adjacency for all game purposes. Also available on the bridge at the shield controls, you may reroute power through the shields, meaning you may remove an electrical fault from the board by lowering the shields, or you may voluntarily place an electrical fault on the board to raise your shields. If your shields track ever reaches all the way down to the bottom, so the red where the ship exploding image is, then the ship explodes and you have lost the game. You can take an action in sickbay to remove all the wounds from your character, and you can take an action in maintenance to refresh your equipment cards. because a lot of the equipment cards have free actions on them that require you to exhaust them. A free action will generally prevent something from happening. So a fire extinguisher, for example, has the free action that you can exhaust the card to prevent a fire from being placed in your space. Again, tokens being placed in your space will wound you, so it is convenient to exhaust the fire extinguisher in order to do that. You can either tap it sideways or flip it over to exhaust it to indicate that it is currently unusable, until you take the action in maintenance to refresh any number of items you are currently carrying. Alternatively, it's free to just drop an item at any point during your turn. You can just dump it on the floor. If you ever drop an exhausted item, it is actually discarded from the game though. The last two actions on the board are you can go to the damage report to look through the disaster discard pile, and lastly you can go to the time drive to perform a time jump. These actions work together, so as the course of the game you're going to be drawing cards from the deck and creating a disaster discard pile. When you time travel, this disaster discard pile will go back on top of the deck in the same order. So if you have time to go to the damage report, you can look through this deck and refresh your memory of the order that things that happened just before it goes back on, and you have to repeat the timeline. You won't always have time to do that. It's a little bit of an awkward action to take, but if you're desperate to remind yourselves of what's happened, you can do that at the damage report. I'll go into a little more detail about how time jumping works in a moment. An important caveat that I forgot to mention here is that if any of these blue locations have an electrical fault on them, they are not usable for their action. Electrical faults block actions available on the board. Once the players have taken their turns, let's say we're spread out a little bit and we've picked up some equipment, every character card has a space for 2 carried items and 1 wearable item, indicated by the symbols in the top right corner. Each round players can choose which one of them goes first, and then it proceeds in a clockwise turn order. Once all players have completed their movement and actions, again they're not mandatory to do both those things, or indeed either of those things, once every player has completed, we're going to move on to the consequences phase. This is what the red symboled spots on the board are for. First thing that's going to happen is we're going to check all of the red symboled spots on the board. For example, if the fuel cells has 3 damage in it, that's these tokens, the fuel cells has 3 damage, the ship explodes and you lose the game. If the shield generator has 3 damage in it, these shields begin to malfunction and this track goes down. Again, if it hits the end, the ship explodes, you lose the game. If the life support has 3 damage in it, all players take a wound, and if all players die, you lose the game. And if the airlock has 3 damage in it, the airlock will bust open, which will cause you to enact an airlock opening very shortly. Again, that's probably going to be a pretty bad situation for you. Once you've checked the 4 red symboled locations, we're going to do a few extra bits. Every single fire on the board is going to place 1 damage in its location, remembering that anytime a token is placed in a player's space, that player takes a wound. So every fire places 1 damage. If you have more than 3 electrical faults on the board, you're also going to lower the shields by 1 as the ship starts to malfunction. So too many electrical faults will slowly kill you. After all that horror, the consequences phase is complete. Now it's time for the disaster phase, where we add more horror to the board. You're going to turn over the top card of the disaster deck. If it's a growing disaster, you're going to start at the top and enact every single effect all the way down until the player count, meaning that it's 2+, 3+, 4+, and 5 players. In a 5-player game, you're going to enact all 4 effects in order. We have a 3-player game set up, so starting at the top in the 2+ game, I'm going to place fire in locations 2 and 6. That's unfortunately set my technician on fire, so they are immediately wounded. And 6 is maintenance. Maintenance unfortunately already has a fire. When you place a second fire in a space, it will immediately spread into every adjacent space, meaning there's a fire there and a fire there, but there's also a fire in the hyperdrive, which again already has a fire in it, so that's going to trigger another fire spread. Now, fire can't spread into a space with 2 fire. 2 fires is the maximum amount of fire there can be in any one space, so it can't spread here, but it can spread here, and it can spread into the fuel cells, which again has 2 fire, so that will spread there, and that will spread there. And it can't spread back into the hyperdrive because hyperdrive already has 2 fire. 2 fire essentially blocks a spread. So suddenly, just the first thing on that card has immediately set the back half of the ship on fire and wounded one of our players. The second thing on that card is all players are knocked down, meaning that we have to lie our characters down and it costs 1 movement to stand back up again. The next turn, everyone effectively only has 1 movement, 1 to stand and 1 to move. That is very awkward. Having an exoskeleton on would prevent you from being knocked down, but it's a bit too on fire at the moment because you cannot take actions in spaces that are on fire. Fire prevents actions other than actions that would put out the fire. So if you don't have a fire extinguisher, you just have to kind of run away from the fire. If this was a 4-player game, I'd have also placed an electrical fault in 5, and if it was a 5-player game, I would have placed damage in all corridors connected to spaces 3 and 8. There's the connection 8, that corridor is connected there, and section 3 is there. Connected to is not blocked by adjacency, so if there was a locked door there, that space would still be connected to location 3. It's no longer adjacent, but it is connected, so the damage would still be placed. And while spaces are limited to only 2 fires per space, a space can contain any number of damage and electrical faults. They are not limited in any way, except that if you ever have to place damage tokens and you've run out of damage tokens, the ship explodes and you immediately lose the game. Similarly, if you ever have to place electrical fault tokens and you've run out of electrical fault tokens, the computers fry and you lose the game. Running out of fires and wounds has no effect, other than that the entire ship is on fire and all your characters are likely dead. Running out of locked doors also has no effect, as there's bound to be one for every door on the board. If I'm ever instructed to place an electrical fault in a space that already has an electrical fault, it will place a fire there as well. 2 electrical faults cause a fire, and again, if that's the second fire in that space, that fire will spread as much as it needs to. It's entirely possible for one card to set the entire ship on fire in a worst case scenario. And again, it's important to remember that for every token placed in this phase, the characters will take 1 wound, and once your wounds are full, you are immediately killed. If you turn over a disaster card and it's a major disaster, i.e. one with only a single effect on it, then you must enact the card in full. This example is Explosion in location 5, so that places 1 damage in the location. All players are knocked down if they were not already. Fire in the location, and a fire in every adjacent location, which again would cascade, but let's not go crazy. I can't set the whole board on fire for you now. At the end of the disaster phase, you would check to see if the airlock was open. If the airlock was open, you would then enact an airlock opening. This means that if a player in the airlock on their turn deliberately opens the airlock and enacts an airlock opening, then you will do the effect immediately. Then also at the end of the round, at the end of the disaster phase, you will enact the airlock opening again. So it would effectively happen twice in a round unless a player closes the door first. Once that fresh hell has been unleashed, we're back to the players' turns. Again, they can choose a starting player. It doesn't have to be the same as last round or be affected by the choice made last round at all. It's just an efficiency question of what order the players think they need to take their actions in order to solve the problem the most quickly. In this case, you can see there's quite a lot of fire, quite a lot of damage is going to be placed on the board at the end of this round. It's quite a dangerous situation, so eventually players are going to want to retreat to the time drive. When the game becomes too much and loss is inevitable, you're going to want to do a time jump. Time travelling back to the beginning of the game and starting afresh. When you do that, a paradox card from the paradox deck is going to be placed on top of the disaster deck, and the discard pile is going to be placed back on top of it in the exact same order. All the exact same effects are going to happen in the exact same order as they happened before, so you have the added knowledge of trying to solve the puzzle before it happens, but the additional effect of the paradox when you get to it. Once you've gone through those 2 cards again, and you get to there, you know that in the end of this round, you're going to have a paradox because that's the point in which you time jumped. Paradox cards are totally random. Sometimes they might be the worst thing ever, sometimes they could be genuinely helpful, sometimes they might just basically do nothing at all. The important thing is that they are unpredictable and random as hell. They are a glitch in time that will cause you to reevaluate what you're doing. They may even add new rules to the game. And as mentioned in setup, the 3rd paradox card always causes you to blink out of existence. So as soon as you place that in the deck, you're on a ticking clock to win the game before the card is drawn. However, in addition to the paradox, you're still going to draw a disaster effect. It's still going to trigger the disaster. The paradox was as well as the disaster card, not instead of. But the good stuff when you time jump is that everyone gets drawn back to the time drive and you clear everything off of the board that wasn't there during setup. So the game goes right back to how it was when you saw it at the beginning of the game. You're also going to reseed the board with all the equipment that was there at the start of the game, meaning there is a fresh supply of equipment for the players to use. The players themselves will retain the equipment that they are carrying, as well as any wounds that they have, unless the difficulty level that you've chosen for the game says otherwise. There are a few variables, but we advise using the lowest one for your first few games just to get used to the system. We've just included some options to make the game harder if that's what you're into. The other advantage of time travel is if indeed one of your characters had died through a course of taking too many wounds, they would come back to life and reset as if they were at the beginning of the game. Unfortunately, they would have lost all of the equipment that they've carried, as it simply was not be brought back with them, but they would also be fully healed, as if they've just appeared for the very first time. So players will keep their stuff, travel back to the time drive, and have the added knowledge of knowing what's going to happen. For example, we know that fire spreads from here, so very quickly somebody could rush there and lock these doors down so that fire doesn't spread this time. The game is then going to look very different upon drawing that card. The entire back of the ship will not be on fire, for example. It's amazing how much a little knowledge can save you, and it's generally intended to be impossible to win the first time around. You will have to time travel at least once to win the game. Players can now rush out and pick up fresh batches of equipment for them to be wearing or carrying and attempt to win the game on a second, third or fourth run. Remembering of course that the game is on a timer once the third paradox card is in the deck, but also the game is just generally on a timer. If this deck ever runs out and you're required to draw a card, once more you've gone too deep into the timeline, the ship has exploded and you've lost the game. Yeah, there's lots of ways to lose and only one way to win, but that's kind of the sign of a good co-op, I think. And that's the size of it. Every piece of equipment does at least 2 things, so you're going to want to familiarise yourself with those, and every character has their own unique power that work in conjunction with each other in unique ways. So again, you're going to want to make sure you familiarise each other with what your characters can do at the start of the game, but otherwise you're here to fix the ship, fix the engine, pilot your way home, and survive your first time-travelling adventure. If you want to know more about the game, I posted a few other videos about my channel, but thank you for watching, and I really hope that you are intrigued and excited for the release of this. Our Kickstarter will be going up on May 27th. That is our current scheduled date, May 27th for the launch of our Kickstarter, and we will be at the UK Games Expo from May 30th to June 1st is the UK Games Expo 2025 in Birmingham, and that's going to be our whole, probably a whole month, starting from the launch of Kickstarter. It's just going to become my life for about a month at least. Really hope you're excited about the game. If you're into your board games, please do check it all out. If you go all the way to the end here, please do follow us on Kickstarter if you don't already. And yeah, we're just really excited to get the game out into the world. Thank you again for watching. That's me for now. Check out the game. I can't say that enough. It's all about the video and all about the game, and I don't know what to do because I'm going mad because this has been my life for a little while and it's going to consume my entire life for a little bit. But yeah, thanks for watching. That's all for now. The end. Should I record a less insane outro? Or should I just stick with that? No, I'll just stick with that.